On June 29, 1764, sometime between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, residents of small settlements in what is now northeastern Germany were returning home from church for their midday meal. It was a day of repentance and prayer, so the fields and forest roads were unusually empty. A brief shower had passed over the lakes near Feldberg. The sun had returned, children were playing by the water, farmers were checking their livestock, and nothing seemed to suggest that a catastrophe was approaching. But another thunderstorm was already growing to the south. It moved without the usual curtain of heavy rain, keeping its greatest danger hidden. Within minutes, the air became completely still. Then a distant rumble appeared, growing deeper and louder with every second. What is now known as the Woldegk tornado did not actually pass through the town of Woldegk itself. Its path lay farther west, and there, a funnel of such extraordinary power formed that more than 2.5 centuries later, scientists still place it in the highest category of destructive intensity. But the first warning did not come from the sky. It came from the surface of a lake. Around midday, distant thunderstorms were already rumbling to the northwest. A short burst of rain fell over Feldberg. The sky brightened again, and shortly before 1 o'clock, a separate and rapidly developing storm approached from the south. In 1764, there were no weather radars, forecasting models, emergency broadcasts, or warning sirens. People could judge danger only by the wind, the clouds, and the behavior of animals. Yet this storm looked deceptively dry. Witnesses remembered only a few enormous raindrops, while massive and sometimes jagged hailstones crashed down around them. According to later research, some of those hailstones were several centimeters across and may have weighed as much as half a kilogram. They destroyed crops, injured sheep and geese, and wounded people caught outside. A modern reconstruction suggests that a powerful rotating thunderstorm was moving from the south-southwest toward the north-northeast. But its most dangerous section was almost invisible behind grey dust, water, shredded leaves, and flying debris. Then the trees began to bend. For several seconds, silence returned. And after that, the ground itself seemed to move. About 1.5 kilometers southwest of Feldberg, the first oak trees began snapping and tearing out of the soil. Over the lake, a witness saw a low cloud whose upper portion appeared to boil. The wind at the shore first disappeared completely, and then the surface of the water erupted into enormous waves. According to the historical account, the lake level appeared to fall for a moment before water surged onto the land for dozens of meters. 2 children were lifted and thrown into the lake. Both survived. But farther along the path, the funnel struck a lime kiln. Its roof was torn away, its walls collapsed, and 1 man was killed. He became the only confirmed fatality along the tornado's entire path, although no one yet understood that Feldberg had witnessed only the beginning. The funnel entered a beech forest and cut a straight corridor through it. Trees lay in the same direction, like grass flattened by a scythe. The storm then crossed another body of water, gathering moisture and debris before moving toward the fields near Schlicht. There, oak trees nearly a meter thick were ripped from the earth, while heavy sections of their trunks were carried through the air for dozens of meters. Over the open fields, the tornado became stronger. It stripped away crops, tore grass from the ground, and removed several centimeters of topsoil. Dust mixed with hail, branches, water, and fragments of buildings, turning the funnel into a dense black wall. Sunlight could still be seen in front of it. Inside, everything disappeared. When the rotating mass reached the Lichtenberg forest, the damage became more severe than before. Beech and oak trees were snapped, uprooted, or stripped of their branches, and some old trunks lost sections of bark. But the true turning point came farther ahead. A recently constructed 2-story estate building stood directly in the tornado's path. The large brick structure had been built to survive the ordinary storms of the region. It did not survive even a few seconds. After the impact, almost the entire upper floor and much of the outer structure had vanished. Only scattered sections of the lower brick walls remained. Around the estate, the remnants of massive oak trees had been torn from the ground, while heavy stones were overturned or pushed out of place. At this location, the disaster crossed the line from extreme destruction into something that seemed almost impossible. Much later, the destruction of the Lichtenberg estate would become the main basis for assigning the tornado the highest rating on the International Fujita scale. The European Severe Storms Laboratory classified this section of the path as 5th category damage, the near total destruction of a large, recently built structure with strong brick construction. Researchers also documented trees that had been ripped from the ground, lifted and carried through the air for at least 160 meters. But this is where the central mystery of Woldegk begins. In 1764, no one measured the wind speed. Every modern estimate is based on damage patterns, witness statements, and the strength of the objects that were destroyed. Claims that the wind definitely reached almost 500 kilometers per hour sound dramatic, but they cannot be proven. What can be said is that the damage corresponds to the highest category, and that this was one of the most violent tornadoes ever reliably documented in Europe. And after destroying the estate, the tornado did not disappear. It only weakened temporarily as it expanded over marshy ground. In the Woldegk forest, the damage path widened to almost a kilometer. A dark rotating mass moved among the falling trees, surrounded by birds trapped inside the circulation. Near the ruins of the so-called Red Church, the tornado uprooted an ancient oak in a cemetery and lifted a human skeleton from the grave along with the roots. Then came a strange interruption. For roughly 500 meters, the damage weakened so sharply that it appeared the catastrophe had ended. But it was only a pause. Near Canzo, the wind tore the roof from an estate, destroyed 2 barns, partially collapsed a shelter for sheep, and overturned 7 heavy farm wagons. Farther on, the vortex struck a flock of geese, lifting the birds into the air and leaving dozens injured or dead. In Helpte, an old stable collapsed while the roof and upper floor of a gatehouse were torn away. Other buildings were damaged as well. No organized rescue service existed. There was no communication system capable of warning the next village. Every settlement learned about the tornado only when its residents heard it approaching. Roughly an hour after the funnel first formed, it finally dissipated. According to the modern record, its path extended for about 33 kilometers, while its maximum width reached approximately 800 meters. An earlier reconstruction based on the original historical report estimated a path of around 30 kilometers and a width of up to 900 meters. The different figures found in accounts of Woldegk are therefore not evidence of deception, but the result of later reassessments of old information. 1 death and 3 injuries are confirmed. For a tornado of this strength, that number seems almost impossible. The explanation lies in the calendar. Because it was a church observance day, many people were not working in the fields and forests where the tornado destroyed almost everything in its path. The enormous disaster also passed through a relatively sparsely populated region and narrowly missed the town of Woldegk itself. Forests, farms and crops were torn apart. Damage to forestry alone was valued at 10,000 thalers, an amount later compared to roughly 175 kilograms of silver. Had the same tornado passed only slightly farther east, Europe might remember it not as a historical mystery, but as a mass tragedy. We know what happened that day because of Gottlob Burchard Gensmer. Acting on instructions from local authorities, he began examining the affected region 2 months after the disaster. He followed the damage path, interviewed witnesses, compared their accounts, and deliberately rejected details that appeared exaggerated. His work consisted of a preface and 7 letters divided into 77 paragraphs. The book, published in 1765, included a map of the tornado's path and drawings of damaged trees. Gensmer called the phenomenon a hurricane, but he never presented speculation as established fact. That caution made his report scientifically valuable centuries later. Today, the Woldegk tornado is officially recognized as a confirmed European event of the highest damage category. But the honest conclusion matters more than the dramatic title. We cannot prove that it was more powerful than every other tornado ever to strike the continent. We can prove that Europe is capable of producing a catastrophe of almost unimaginable intensity, quietly, rapidly, and with almost no warning. Sometimes history preserves a disaster, not because thousands of people died, but because one person looked carefully at the destruction and wrote down the truth.